Getting into one PhD program is rare, let alone getting into multiple. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm a first year PhD student in History and African American Studies at Yale University. A year ago from when you were watching this video, on February 3rd is when I received my offer of acceptance to Yale University. It was the one and only PhD acceptance that I did receive. I applied to 5 schools, and though I did not have to make the decision between any of the other schools, I actually accepted my offer before I heard back from any of the other schools, including Harvard, Stanford, Penn, UVA, and I knew that Yale was right for me from the minute I had my interview. I interviewed with Dr. Blight and immediately got the feeling that Yale was the right place for me. I strongly believe in intuition and trusting your gut, and I just knew that Yale was right. And so even before I heard back from the other schools, I accepted my offer. And today I wanted to make a video congratulating all of you that have been accepted to your PhD programs and to discuss what is next. How do you decide which program to go to? Do you go to the program you've been accepted to? How to know that you're making the right choice? I have a lot of things to cover, and so I'm gonna go ahead and get straight into it. But if you are in the situation that you have not been accepted or you're still waiting for decisions, I have a video coming out on Friday, which is going to specifically talk about what to do, whether you've been waitlisted or rejected, and what to do next. So make sure to stick around for that video as well. I know that many of you are awaiting a decision and are feeling anxious, and I put up a little question box on my Instagram asking what you guys would like to see and what would be helpful for you, especially during this particular time as you wait for decisions or start receiving decisions back. And so one thing that people wanted me to talk about the most was, one, how to pick which program to go to, whether you're picking the right program, as well as how to handle rejection. So this is the video talking about how to select which program to attend, how to weigh your options, how to look at your offer, how to consider various factors when deciding whether that school is right for you. And then on Friday, I'll be making a video all about how to handle rejection and how to move forward, how to get off the wait list, all of those things. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. So first of all, I want to talk about imposter syndrome and this feeling of disbelief when you get your acceptance letter. I remember getting my acceptance letter. I was sitting in a seminar when I was at Oxford. I was surrounded by my friends. I was at Corpus Christi. My advisor was there, and I opened my email up after class and I saw congratulations from the Yale History Department. And I immediately shut my computer and started bawling because I couldn't believe that I had gotten into my dream school. I just couldn't believe that that was even possible. And it was the same feeling that I had when I got into Oxford. It was the same feeling that I had when I got into UCLA. There is so much imposter syndrome and doubt in the field of academia, and it is not uncommon to feel that you were undeserving of this acceptance or that you're not sure if they picked the right person. And I want you to know that those admissions committees work long and hard in order to figure out who's going to be the right fit for their program, and you were selected for a reason. This is my second term as a Yale PhD student, and I still have those feelings of I don't belong here, or I don't deserve to be here, or I'm not smart enough, or what if I don't come up with enough ideas? What if I'm not able to keep up? And so those feelings don't go away, but what I'm going to tell you is that you have to put them aside. Be excited about the fact that you worked your absolute tail off in order to get this acceptance. You went through the grueling application process. You performed research and preparation. You went through years of training as an undergraduate and perhaps even a master's student in order to be even considered by these PhD programs. And that is a huge feat. So make sure that you're also giving yourself the room to cheer yourself on and be excited, because this is an important time in your life. And I know that I wish I could tell myself when I got in, you absolutely deserved this. So now let's talk about offers. So you're going to be sent an offer letter saying that you've been accepted, but it's also going to have all the details of your program, of your stipend, all of those things. So we're going to talk very specifically about all the things that should be in consideration when you're looking at these programs. So first, let's talk funding. This is probably one of the most important parts and nobody talks about it. So you're going to be given an offer of what your living stipend is going to be. Every school has a slightly different funding scheme. So for example, at Yale, my tuition is covered, my health insurance is covered, I do not have to pay any student fees, but I am given a living stipend, which is not taxed. So I have to take those taxes out myself. And I made a video about the amount that I make. So if you want to watch that, I'm going to put it in a card up above, or you can go ahead and check the link down below after watching this video. But essentially you make a certain amount and then you have to take out quarterly taxes on your own as though you were a contractor. So the amount that you see on that funding package, also remember to consider taxes in that state, federal tax, etc. The next thing is that most schools will pay the tuition, but some will not pay your fees. All of this is something that you should be considering when looking at your package to make sure that this is actually feasible. PhD students are not paid nearly enough. PhD students are paid essentially minimum wage, and it's not even taxed. You need to be sure that you are ready to make the financial commitment of taking a pretty big blow to your potential salary if you go into a PhD program, especially in the humanities or in the social sciences. That being said, I knew the realities of going into a PhD program. I was offered a six-figure job in the Silicon Valley and decided to not take those offers because I truly loved research. I truly wanted to pursue my goals of becoming a historian. So I did not make my decision based on finances in any way, shape, or form. I did not choose to do a PhD because I didn't have any other options. I did it because I loved it. And so I knew the realities of the funding situation, which is why I really threw myself into my YouTube channel and my business in order to have a side income to pay off my debt. So these are things that you want to be considering. So how much debt have you accrued? Are you going to be able to pay any of that off while you're in your PhD program? Is the stipend that you're going to receive a living wage, etc.? So one other thing to consider is your health insurance coverage package. So every school has a slightly different insurance scheme for their students, and this is something that is probably more evident now that we are living through COVID, but essentially the package will cover a certain degree of medical services. So one thing that you want to consider in particular is whether you're going to be able to receive care out of network. So for example, if I were in California and I were to get into a car accident or something terrible to happen and I needed emergency services, would my health insurance still cover that? At Yale, it only covers emergency services. If I needed any other type of medical help while I was out of network, I wouldn't be able to receive it and have the benefits of my insurance coverage. Additionally, you want to think about health insurance when you're ABD. So once you've actually become a doctoral candidate and you're going to potentially be doing field work and whatnot. So those are things that you want to be considering. Additionally, if you have a family or if you plan on having a family while you're in your PhD program, you also want to look at the coverage for your partner or your children. And so while that was not something that I personally had to consider when I was applying, I just want to mention it here because it is a consideration that you may want to take note of and just look into. The next thing is obviously program considerations, but I want to be more specific in that you want to know what the requirements are to graduate. One thing that's super important is how long does your contract last where you have secured funding. So Yale actually just recently extended it to 6 years. Most programs may not have that. Your funding is also going to come from different areas in the university depending on your field of study and your department. So for example, all of my funding throughout the 6 years of my education at Yale is going to be coming from the Yale Graduate School. But if you were to work in the sciences and you were working in a lab, then oftentimes your funding for the first year or so may come from the graduate school or from the department, but then after that you're going to need to find outside funding. Whether that's funding that's coming from a grant via your supervisor, your advisor, or whether you're going to need to find funding outside of that network, you just want to be aware of what that's going to require of you and what that's going to mean in terms of teaching responsibilities, coursework availability, the timing of your research prospectus, when your comp exams are going to be, and how long you can be ABD until you need to defend. All of these things are super important to consider, and in order to figure all of these things out, this brings me to my next point. Talk to graduate students. And don't just talk to one, talk to as many as you can get a hold of. Oftentimes when you've been given an offer of acceptance, the graduate school will reach out to their current PhD students and say, hey, we accepted this person, they're within your particular field, subfield, and we would like you to reach out to them and see if they have any questions. Graduate students may be reaching out to you already, but if not, then reach out to those that are on the website and ask them questions and be explicit and say, what are the living arrangements like in New Haven? What is the living stipend? Is it livable? I talked to students at all the other schools I applied to when I was in the application stage, and there were some situations where students said the living stipend was not actually a livable wage in the city they were in. So for example, if you were at Berkeley and you were making the same amount that I make here, it would not be a living wage, simply because living expenses are far greater. So talk to graduate students, ask them about coursework structures, ask them about funding, and then additionally, you want to ask them about faculty support. You want to see who's actually supportive and who's going to be a good faculty advisor to you, what the faculty culture is like, what the department culture is like, and see whether that's actually going to be a good fit for you. And graduate students know so much more than your potential advisor might, because they're on the ground, they're taking the classes, they're working with all these different professors, they know what the cohort is like and all of those things. Another thing to mention is union support. Yale's union for graduate students is called Local 33, and it is not recognized by Yale University. So it has very little fighting power in order to increase stipends or increase support for graduate students or to negotiate insurance plans. And that was something that I knew when I came for Visiting Students Weekend, and that is something that you do want to ask about when you're talking to current graduate students, because having union support means that you can actually organize around increasing wages and have some pull with the graduate school. Here at Yale, there's very little support to that effect. It wouldn't have been a deciding factor, but it is definitely something to consider. Now we're going to talk about living arrangements. So every city, every school is going to be slightly different. If I had the same stipend that I have here and I were living in Boston, if I had gone to Harvard, or if I were trying to live in New York City, or if I were trying to live in Palo Alto to go to Stanford, this would not be a living wage. There's no way I could live on my own. There's absolutely no way that I could have a one-bedroom apartment. If the stipend is not going to be a livable wage for you to live alone, and that's something that's important to you, are you going to be able to find enough outside income in order to cover that? Additionally, with how much you have in, say, debt from your previous institutions, you may need to consider that in your funding. So for example, I try to pay $300 a month towards my student loans at minimum, and I pretty much use my entire YouTube ad revenue in order to pay that. But if I didn't have that additional income, I wouldn't be able to pay off any of my debt, and it would start accruing interest. And additionally, I could not afford to live in a one-bedroom apartment on my own. Everybody's financial situation is going to be different, and they're going to have different considerations that you're going to have to take into account. I honestly don't know how I'd be able to pay for travel to visit my family during the holidays if I didn't have this additional income. So keep those things in mind when you're looking at the stipend and you're looking at the city where that school is located. You want to see, like, what are the average rent costs, and to reach out to someone that's at that school. Talk to the graduate students, decide whether living alone is something that you have to have. For me, I'm 25 years old. I've lived with many roommates since I was 18, and I was ready to live alone. It didn't really make sense for me to live with a roommate. I certainly would be saving a lot of money if I did, but I also live in an apartment building that is not as expensive as some of the other luxury buildings in the city. So just keep in mind all of the different living arrangements that are available. You can rent a room for way less money than I pay for a one-bedroom apartment, but some of them don't have kitchen access, or you are going to have to deal with roommates, and people in my cohorts have had a lot of issues with roommates. And so just keep all those things in mind when you're weighing your options and considering what your life is going to be like if you decide to accept that offer. Now let's talk about picking between 2, maybe 3 of your best options. Let's say you get into 2 or 3 PhD programs, which, by the way, congratulations if you did, because getting into one PhD program is rare, let alone getting into multiple. And there's reasons for that, which I will discuss in the next video. But things that you want to be considering specifically between the different programs are your advisor, stipend security, the amount of funding that you may receive, department culture, and access to funding. So your advisor is going to be your lifeline. Your advisor is going to be the person who supports you, who pushes you, who is really going to help you along. And so make sure that that is someone that you really want to work with for the next 5+ years, and that you guys are a good fit, and that they're going to be supportive of you, and that they're going to push you to be the best that you can be. Of course, you're going to learn more about your advisor as you get to know them while you're in the program, but asking other graduate students and talking to your advisor and figuring out whether you're a good fit is something that should really be in consideration, because again, they are what is going to make or break your career, and you want to make sure that you're going to have a positive relationship with them. The next thing to consider is obviously funding, and I know I've talked about funding a lot in this video, but it is so important, and people just don't talk about it nearly enough and nearly as explicitly as they should. And so I'm telling you, go in with your eyes wide open. Know what kind of money you're going to be making and whether or not you need to make additional considerations for yourself, for your living arrangements, and for your future. Because not only are you taking a huge potential cut in your pay, that you could be making more working retail, but you're also committing to that funding for 5+ years. So make sure it's something that you're actually going to be able to live with and live on. The next thing is stipend security. So making sure that you are going into a program that is going to make sure that your stipend is secure for a number of years. This is going to obviously vary depending on the program, as I said before, but make sure that you're going in with your eyes wide open as to what the realities are of that funding package. The next thing I mentioned was department culture. So you want to make sure that the department is one that's very supportive and that's going to provide a community for you. I felt very at home immediately with this history department here at Yale, as well as the AFAM department. I would say I felt even more at home in the AFAM department than I do in the history department, just based on the size of the cohort. Go to those visiting students days. I know you can't physically go to them, but make sure that you're going to the presentations and asking questions, because getting to know what the department and what the faculty and other people in your cohort are going to be like is going to be important in your final decision. And the other thing that I mentioned was access to funding. So you also want to weigh where the money is in each school. So for example, the funding for travel and for conferences and all of that stuff is not actually from the Yale History Department. If I want to find funding, I have to go to all of these different centers like the Macmillan, and they have different stipulations depending on what your research is. And you also need to consider the amount of funding that is available there and whether you're going to be able to attend conferences, because professional development is just as important as your research. You need to be networking and getting out there. And so making sure that that school is actually going to have the funding for you to do that is something that is so important to consider. Make sure that you are taking all of these things into account, making your pro cons list, and lastly, trusting your gut. At the end of the day, you will know where you are meant to be. I personally believe that you end up where you're meant to be, and that you can make almost any situation work in your favor. But with that all being said, you just need to sit with your thoughts, look at this pro cons list, weigh all of your options, and see which program is right for you. I knew the minute I got into Yale that that's where I wanted to go, and I immediately accepted my offer. I think I was actually the first person in the entire cohort to accept my offer, and I have zero regrets to that effect. It's definitely been a hard year since my first year was entirely online, but I hope for your sake that your first year in your PhD program is in person and that we are able to get back to our academic communities and actually get to be with our cohorts. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this video because it is getting mighty long. I hope that it was enjoyable and that you got some helpful tips out of it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email and everything is down below. So if you enjoyed this one, please remember to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you are not yet subscribed, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye everyone.